Before we jump into today's episode, I am so excited to be able to tell you that my debut book, Optimal You, Supercharge Your Energy, Strengthen Your Immunity, is now published. Optimal You is a groundbreaking guide uncovering the 8 pillars of health for supercharged energy and strengthened immunity to optimize your health and extend your health span. Delve into evidence-based strategies to optimize nutrition, balance your lifestyle, reduce toxin exposure, and address root causes of health imbalances. It includes a 14-step anti-inflammatory nutrition blueprint to supercharge your mitochondria and fortify your immune system. Plus, you get my 4 lifestyle S's: sleep, stress, strength, and social, that form the foundation of optimal well-being. On top of all that, when you buy the book, you get access to a special area on the website that gives you all the resources, plus recipes and guides that we talk about within the book. You can empower yourself with practical tools and insights to embark on a transformative journey towards Optimal You. Head over to optimalyoubook.com to get your copy now, or you can get your copy from Amazon worldwide or your local bookstore. When you've got your copy, don't forget to share on social media, tag me in it at good_health, GOODE, and use the hashtag OptimalYouBook. I can't wait to see what you think of the book, and I really hope that it brings you lots of health and wellness. Now let's head to today's episode.
Welcome to the Good Health Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Good, a certified functional medicine practitioner, registered nutritionist, and author. In this podcast, we delve into the world of energy and immune health and wellness with positivity, from optimal health and energy to stress and burnout, right through to immune conditions such as thyroid and autoimmune disease. We deep dive into functional medicine, nutritional medicine, and lifestyle medicine, as well as the personal stories of our amazing guests, from Olympians to famous faces and guest experts from all different parts of the health and wellness world. It's time to stop letting your health hold you back and become the optimal version of you. Don't forget to come and join the conversation on Instagram at good_health, that's GOODE, or visit the website nicolegoodhealth.com to find out more.
Burnout isn't just feeling exhausted. It's a full body shutdown mentally, emotionally, and physically. And the worst part, most of us don't even realize we're heading straight for it until it's too late. I wish I'd known the warning signs earlier. I wish I'd understood what was really happening in my body. And most of all, I wish someone had told me that pushing through wasn't the answer. If you're feeling drained, no matter how much you rest, if your motivation has disappeared, if brain fog is making simple tasks feel impossible, or if your body is breaking down with unexplained symptoms, this episode is for you. Today, I'm sharing 20 things I wish I'd known about burnout before I hit the walls so that you don't have to. We're going to cover the real difference between stress and burnout, why you can feel wired at night but exhausted in the morning, how burnout messes with your hormones, immune system, and digestion, and why high performers ignore the warning signs until it's too late. I'll also share what actually works when it comes to recovery, because taking time off just isn't enough. Welcome to the Good Health Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Good, a certified functional medicine practitioner and registered nutritional therapist, founder of the Good Health Clinic, and author of the book Optimal You, Supercharge Your Energy, Strengthen Your Immunity. Here on the Good Health Podcast, we explore the science and strategies behind living a healthier, more vibrant life. Whether you're navigating stress, burnout, and fatigue, or you've reached a point of having a chronic illness or autoimmune disease, or you're looking to prioritize your health for longevity, you're in the right place. Each episode is designed to bring you actionable insights and practical tips rooted in evidence-based functional medicine, alongside stories and advice to help you live with more energy, balance, clarity, and purpose. If you enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode, and leave a review or share it with someone who might benefit. It really helps us to reach more people on their health journey. Thanks for tuning in, and let's dive into today's episode. If you've ever wondered, am I actually burnt out or just tired? Keep listening. This episode might just change everything. So let's get into it. We're breaking down the topic areas into understanding burnout, hidden signs and symptoms, physical health and burnout, and recovery and prevention. And these are the top 20 questions I wish I'd known about burnout. Let's start with understanding burnout. Question 1. How do I know if I'm actually burnt out or just tired? Tiredness is temporary. You rest and you feel better. Burnout is different. It's not just about exhaustion. It's a state where your body and brain can't recover properly no matter how much sleep you get. You might feel detached, unmotivated, irritable, or experience brain fog. Your nervous system is essentially stuck in overdrive, which is too much cortisol, or completely drained, which is too little cortisol. If you keep pushing, your body will eventually force you to stop, usually through illness, injury, or extreme fatigue. And that's the difference between burnout and just being tired. Question 2, can you burn out without feeling stressed? Absolutely. Some people think burnout only happens when you feel constantly overwhelmed, but that's not true. In some cases, burnout creeps in silently, especially if you've been running on adrenaline for a long time. You might actually feel numb, unmotivated, or disconnected instead of stressed. And this happens because your stress response has been on overdrive for so long that your body stops reacting. It's a sign of that HPA axis dysregulation. Your brain and adrenals are no longer communicating properly, and it may actually be difficult for you to mount a stress response. Question 3, what's the difference between stress and burnout? Think of stress as too much and burnout as not enough. So stress equals overload. You're juggling too much, you're feeling overwhelmed, but you're still pushing through. Burnout is that shutdown. So your body and your brain are starting to check out. Even small tasks are feeling impossible. Motivation is gone and you're just feeling emotionally drained. In functional medicine, stress increases cortisol and adrenaline. Burnout happens when those systems crash, leaving you running on empty. Low cortisol, depleted neurotransmitters, and mitochondrial dysfunction. So your cells are struggling to make energy. Question 4, why do high performers ignore burnout until it's too late? Because success rewards overworking. When we're high achievers, we often don't recognize burnout because we think fatigue is normal. It just becomes a part of everyday life, or we believe that we can push it through. Plus, adrenaline actually makes you feel really productive. So even when your body is breaking down, you actually can feel quite good in the early days because you've got that excess cortisol and adrenaline. The real problem is that when you're a high performer, or those who always put others first, often you don't slow down until you hit a wall, which could be a major health issue, or complete exhaustion and burnout. Essentially, you've got that personality where you don't stop until your body makes you. And make no mistake, your body will make you at some point. Question 5, are there different types of burnout? Yes, absolutely. And they often overlap. So we often have more than one. So we have physical burnouts. This is things like chronic fatigue, inflammation, hormonal imbalances, frequent colds, that low immunity. Then we have the mental side of burnout. So we have brain fog, forgetfulness, inability to focus. And then we have emotional burnout, loss of motivation, disconnection, and feeling numb or cynical. And many people will experience a mix of all three. And recovery may require addressing both the body and the mind to take that full body approach like we do at Good Health. So moving on from understanding burnout, let's look at some questions on the hidden signs and symptoms of burnout. So question 6, I feel exhausted but can still function. Am I really burnt out? Yes, and this is actually one of the most dangerous stages of burnout because it's easy to ignore. Right now, your body is still compensating. It's pushing out extra cortisol and adrenaline to keep you going. You might feel wired but tired. You might feel able to push through with caffeine or with sheer willpower, but this is a ticking time bomb. Think of it like running on credit. Your body is borrowing energy that it doesn't actually have. And just like maxing out your credit card, there comes a point when the system is going to collapse. And that's when burnout fully sets in, when no amount of sleep, rest, or motivation seem to bring you back. And this is why testing can be so helpful. Functional medicine markers like your cortisol levels throughout the day, your DHEA, show you whether your adrenal glands are in overdrive or starting to crash. And that HRV, that heart rate variability, that measures that nervous system balance. Low HRV suggests chronic stress, and salivary or urinary cortisol patterns can help to reveal if your cortisol is dysregulated, high when it should be low or vice versa. So if you're feeling constantly drained but still able to function, your body is actually warning you. And the goal isn't to wait until you collapse, it's to intervene before you hit that wall. Question 7, why do I feel wired at night but exhausted in the morning? This is one I get asked so much. This is actually cortisol dysregulation. So ideally, cortisol is high in the morning to wake you up and low at night to help you sleep. But chronic stress can flip this. So we can actually get low morning cortisol, so you wake up feeling like a zombie. And we can get high evening cortisol, so you get that second wind at night. And this can happen due to blood sugar imbalances, blue light exposure, late night work, or overstimulation. It can be caused by chronic stress. So that prolonged activation of the stress response disrupts your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis. And that leads to erratic cortisol output. Blood sugar imbalances. If your blood sugar crashes overnight, your body will release cortisol and adrenaline as an emergency response. That can wake you up or keep you wired. Then we have the blue light exposure. So those screens at night are going to suppress the melatonin. That's the sleep hormone. It's the opposite of the cortisol. We want that high at night, so it helps us get to sleep, and we want that cortisol low. But actually, the blue light will increase the cortisol while suppressing the melatonin, making it harder for you to feel sleepy. Late night work or overstimulation. Working late, intense exercise, or even just that doom scrolling on social media can really trigger cortisol surges, which keep your brain in go mode. So instead of winding down, you're activating your brain. And we end up with that reverse sleep-wake cycle. So if you constantly go to bed late, you wake up tired, your body may shift into a delayed circadian rhythm, making early mornings just feel really impossible. And when your cortisol becomes dysregulated in one or all of these ways, you don't just feel tired, you feel completely out of sync with yourself. Question 8, can burnout cause brain fog and memory issues? Yes, absolutely. It's not just in your head, because cortisol affects the hippocampus, which is the brain's memory center. So burnout actually directly impacts brain function, particularly in areas responsible for memory, focus, and cognitive clarity. If you're struggling with brain fog, forgetfulness, or trouble concentrating, there's a real physiological reason behind it. Chronic stress and burnout also cause mitochondrial dysfunction, meaning your brain doesn't produce enough energy to focus and process information properly. Low T3, the active thyroid hormone, can also contribute when we're burnt out. One of the biggest culprits is cortisol again, so your body's stress hormone. In small controlled amounts, cortisol actually helps with focus and memory, but chronic stress floods the brain with high cortisol levels, and over time this actually damages the hippocampus, which is the brain's memory and learning center. Short-term, cortisol makes you more alert in moments of stress, but prolonged exposure can shrink that hippocampal volume, impairing memory recall. And long-term research shows that chronic stress is linked to actual structural changes in the brain, increasing the risk of cognitive decline and even neurodegenerative diseases. Another overlooked factor is that mitochondrial dysfunction again. So when your brain cells can't generate enough energy, your mitochondria are these tiny powerhouses in your cells. They're responsible for producing the fuel, the ATP, that fuels everything from memory formation to mental clarity. And if we haven't got enough, if your mitochondria are not working effectively, then burnout is going to deplete that mitochondrial function. And then your brain is literally going to just run out of energy, making it much harder to focus and process information. That mental fatigue is going to kick in, even in simple tasks. And you're going to get stuck in that cycle of forgetfulness and really struggle to retain that new memory. And burnout doesn't just drain your energy, it slows down that thyroid function. So chronic stress is reducing that active T3, that hormone, that thyroid hormone that supports brain function and metabolism. And low T3 levels can actually mimic symptoms of cognitive decline. So slower processing speed, increased brain fog, or difficulty finding words or remembering details. Question 9, why do I feel so numb or unmotivated about things I used to love? So this is a sign of dopamine depletion. Dopamine is one of the neurotransmitters that makes you feel motivated and excited. And when stress is chronic, the brain downregulates your dopamine receptors, making it harder for you to feel joy or drive. And this is why burnout can mimic depression. But unlike clinical depression, burnout will improve with rest and with recovery. Question 10, is burnout connected to anxiety, depression, or irritability? Yes. Burnout can cause anxiety. So when cortisol is high, your nervous system is on edge. It can also lead to depression because when cortisol is low, you lose that motivation and energy. And it can also cause irritability because that happens when you're in the fight or flight mode for too long. So your brain chemistry is actually shifting depending on where you are in the burnout cycle. So let's move on and dig a little deeper into the physical health and burnout. So question 11, why do I keep getting sick when I'm burnt out? So cortisol helps to regulate immune function. And when it's dysregulated, your immune system becomes weaker, making you more prone to colds, infections, and autoimmune issues. Cortisol is a double-edged sword when it comes to immunity. In short bursts, it's anti-inflammatory and immune modulating, helping you to fight off infections and recover quickly. But when cortisol is dysregulated from chronic stress and burnout, your immune system swings out of balance in one of two ways. So high cortisol equals suppressed immunity. So initially when stress is high, cortisol dampens your immune response. And this is why people under pressure often, they don't get sick until they finally relax. So it's a bit like when you go on holiday and then you suddenly get sick because you've stopped. It's because your immune system was being artificially suppressed. And once cortisol levels drop, all those lingering infections get a chance to take hold. So how this shows up, you might go through a stressful period without getting sick, but the moment you take time off, so think post a deadline, after an exam, or when you go on holiday, you suddenly come down with a cold or flu. And then we've got low cortisol, which equals an overactive and weakened immunity. So over time, as burnout progresses and your adrenal glands struggle to keep up with that cortisol production, it leads to that low cortisol output, which can trigger chronic inflammation, increased autoimmunity, and longer recovery times from infections. How does this show up? You might find that minor illnesses linger for weeks, or you feel run down all the time, or existing autoimmune conditions like Hashimoto's, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis all start flaring up. When stress is chronic, your body shifts into a state of low-grade persistent inflammation. And this is because cortisol normally controls inflammatory cytokines. But when it's dysregulated, these inflammatory markers, so things like IL-6 or TNF-alpha, rise, making your immune system more reactive. Your gut health also takes a hit, so stress increases that intestinal permeability, making you more susceptible to food sensitivities, gut infections, and immune dysfunction. And then your mitochondria become dysfunctional, meaning that your cells don't produce enough energy for that immune repair and resilience. So question 12, can burnout trigger thyroid issues, autoimmune conditions, or hormone imbalances? Absolutely. As well as that low-grade inflammation that we've just talked about being a trigger for autoimmunity, long-term stress and burnout don't just weaken the immune system, they can actually trigger or worsen autoimmune diseases. Studies show that stress is a major environmental trigger for conditions like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, lupus, multiple sclerosis, and many more autoimmune diseases. Burnout can increase that autoantibody production, leading to the immune system to attacking its own cells. It can impair immune tolerance, making your body more likely to react to harmless triggers. And it can reduce regulatory T cell function, which normally keeps immune responses balanced. Chronic stress also impacts that thyroid production, as we've seen, that production of T3. And it can also impact reproductive hormones, so low testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone. Question 13, why does my digestion change when I'm stressed or burnt out? Stress and burnout have a huge impact on digestion, and it all comes down to how your body prioritizes survival. When you're under chronic stress, your nervous system shifts into fight or flight mode, so the sympathetic dominance. And this means that blood flow is redirected away from your digestive organs to your muscles and your brain, preparing your body to respond to a threat, even if that threat is just a looming deadline or an endless to-do list. And as a result, stomach acid production drops, which impairs the breakdown of food, leading to bloating, acid reflux, and nutrient malabsorption, especially things like B12, iron, and magnesium. Stress is also going to slow that gut motility, meaning that food moves through your digestive tract much more sluggishly, and that can cause things like constipation. For others, stress does the opposite, so it's going to activate the gut-brain axis in a way that speeds up motility, leading to diarrhea or IBS-like symptoms. Chronic stress and high cortisol levels also weaken the gut lining, so we're going to increase that intestinal permeability, which allows undigested food particles and toxins to enter into the bloodstream. This triggers inflammation and food sensitivities and is a major trigger for autoimmune diseases. Plus, stress disrupts the gut microbiome, reducing beneficial bacteria that support digestion and immunity while allowing opportunistic pathogens to thrive. This is why so many people experience bloating, IBS symptoms, or sudden food intolerances when they're feeling burnt out. The key to restoring digestion is activating the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode, through deep breathing, eating in a calm environment, and using digestive support like bitters, fermented foods, or enzymes if needed. Question 14. Can burnout cause unexplained weight gain or muscle loss? Yes, absolutely. Burnout can lead to unexplained weight gain and muscle loss, and it's largely driven by hormonal imbalances and metabolic dysfunction. So when you're under chronic stress, your body prioritizes survival over muscle maintenance and fat burning and shifts into a catabolic state. High cortisol levels trigger insulin resistance, meaning your cells become less responsive to insulin, causing blood sugar swings and making it easier to store fat, especially around the abdomen. At the same time, cortisol breaks down muscle tissue to convert it into glucose for energy, a process called gluconeogenesis. This leads to the loss of lean muscle mass, making metabolism even slower. Burnout also disrupts thyroid function, lowering those active T3 hormone levels, which reduces your metabolic rate and makes weight loss feel impossible. To make matters worse, stress-induced sleep deprivation and low DHEA, the hormone that counterbalances cortisol, further accelerate muscle loss while promoting fat storage. So many people in burnout also experience nutrient depletion, so low protein intake, vitamin deficiencies, and mitochondrial dysfunction, all of which make it harder to build or maintain muscle. So if you're gaining weight despite eating the same or noticing that your muscle tone is disappearing, your stress response is likely driving these changes. It's almost impossible that these things are not going to happen if you're under chronic stress. The key to reversing this isn't extreme dieting or over-exercising, which can actually make burnout worse, but rather regulating that cortisol, balancing the blood sugar, supporting the thyroid function, and prioritizing a recovery-based exercise routine like strength training and walking. Question 15, does burnout actually affect my ability to recover from workouts? Yes, so burnout has a huge impact on workout recovery, and it all comes down to mitochondrial dysfunction, cortisol dysregulation, and nervous system exhaustion. Your mitochondria, those powerhouses in your cells responsible for producing that ATP, when you're burnt out, chronic stress damages mitochondrial function, meaning your muscles don't generate or replenish energy as efficiently. So this is going to lead to that slower recovery, persistent soreness, and reduced exercise tolerance. You might find that workouts that you used to do that felt easy and now completely wipe you out. Cortisol, that main stress hormone in the body, also plays a role. So in short burst, cortisol helps with exercise performance and inflammation control. But in burnout, cortisol is either too high, causing muscle breakdown, or too low, reducing your ability to repair tissue after exercise. And high cortisol inhibits muscle protein synthesis, making it harder to build and maintain that lean muscle mass. While low cortisol means you're going to struggle with control of that inflammation and oxidative stress post-workout, increasing the risk of injuries, joint pain, and even chronic fatigue. Another major factor is that nervous system imbalance. So burnout often leads to sympathetic dominance, so that fight or flight mode, where your body's really struggling to switch into the parasympathetic rest and recover mode. So after workouts, this is going to cause a problem. It's going to mean that your muscles don't relax and repair efficiently. Your heart rate stays elevated longer than it should. You may notice poor sleep. You may have lingering soreness or increased susceptibility to those overuse injuries. If you're struggling with burnout, the best approach is adjusting your workout intensity to match your recovery capacity. And really the way to find this out is to do an adrenal test. Heavy lifting, those high intensity workouts, long endurance sessions, they may need to be swapped out for a short period of time for lower impact activities, things like walking, swimming, yoga, or strength training. And that might need to be done until those energy reserves are improved. So you need to prioritize that mitochondrial support, cortisol balance, and proper post-workout nutrition to help your body to recover faster. Burnout recovery isn't about stopping exercise altogether. It's about training smarter based on where your cortisol levels and your adrenals are at, not just harder, so that you rebuild the energy rather than depleting it further. Finally, let's move on to the topic of recovery and prevention. So question 16, how long does it take to recover from burnout? This is one I get asked all the time. It really depends. Early stage burnout can take weeks to recover from, but full burnout can take months to a year to recover from. Recovery is going to involve nutrition, rest, nervous system regulation, hormone balancing, all those aspects that we've talked about today and more. Question 17, can I recover from burnout without completely stopping work? Yes, this is a big concern for a lot of people. A lot of people who have burnout are high performers. They are people who have busy lives and busy jobs. You may need to change how you work, especially if you do want to speed up the recovery process. This doesn't mean that you can't work, you can't do your job. It may just mean that you need to look at prioritizing some recovery time, adjusting schedules, setting some boundaries, and learning about working smarter, not harder. But it doesn't mean that you can't do your job. In fact, long term, you'll probably learn how to do your job much better without impacting your health. Question 18, what are the best foods, supplements, or routines to help recovery? Things like magnesium that help relax that nervous system, B vitamins that are going to help to restore that adrenal function, adaptogens to help support cortisol balance, protein-rich meals to stabilize blood sugar. All of these things are going to help. But we've got to look at the bigger picture. We've got to look at food. We've got to look at supplements. We've got to look at lifestyle. We've got to make sure we're looking at the brain, the adrenals, the gut, all these different parts of the body. So taking a whole body approach is going to be key. Question 19, how do I prevent burnout without slowing down my career? Here's one thing I will tell you. If you don't prevent burnout, if you don't work on burnout, if you don't work on stress, you will slow down your career because your body will make you stop. So it really is key to prioritize working on this before it gets to that point. And the steps really are like micro recovery. So little things throughout the day, little breaks, little bits of movement, little bits of breath work, all small steps that you can implement are really going to help. Also balancing the nervous system. So learning to switch between that sort of that go mode and recovery mode and learning how and when to pace yourself. Question 20, what's the biggest mistake that people make when trying to recover from burnout? The biggest mistake I see people make is thinking that just taking a little bit of time off is enough. Going on a holiday, having a short break is not going to be enough to recover from burnout. You're going to come back and you're just going to go back into your old patterns and do exactly the same thing to your body again. Recovery isn't just about resting. It's about retraining your body and your brain to handle stress differently. Burnout isn't just about being tired. It's a full body response to prolonged stress, and it can impact everything from your brain to your gut, to your hormones, to your immune system. And if there is one thing I want you to take away from this episode, it's that burnout doesn't happen overnight. And recovery isn't just about pushing through or waiting until you feel better. It requires intentional steps to restore balance, support your body, and change the patterns that got you here in the first place. If you've been nodding along to this episode, recognizing yourself in some of the symptoms and stories, please don't ignore it. Burnout doesn't just go away on its own. It compounds until your body forces you to stop. The good news, you can turn things around. Small, consistent changes, whether it's prioritizing sleep, balancing blood sugar, addressing hidden stressors, can all start to shift your energy, your resilience, and your overall health. You don't have to give up your lifestyle or your job in order to be able to work on burnout. In fact, we can build the protocols around your lifestyle. So what's your next step? If you want to understand where you are on the burnout spectrum, take my burnout self-assessment quiz in the show notes below. It will give you clarity on what's really going on and where to focus your recovery. If you're ready to get personalized support, book a burnout recovery inquiry call or a functional health assessment if you're ready to get started. And let's work on a plan that works for you. All the links are in the show notes below. Thanks for listening. And if this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Send me a message on Instagram at GOODE_health, or share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Your health matters and you don't have to do this alone. I'll see you next time on the Good Health Podcast.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Good Health Podcast. Do share the episode with anyone you think it may benefit and help us to spread the word on all things health and wellness by rating, liking, or subscribing to the podcast. If you want more, you can listen to more episodes on your favourite podcast app or sign up to my newsletter for all my favourite tips, tricks, health advice, brands, recipes, and more at nicolegoodhealth.com/newsletter. Have a lovely week. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Good Health Podcast.